In a remote monastery in the Tibetan highlands, a young monk named Tenzin dedicated his life to studying the ancient teachings of the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. He had heard the stories, whispers among the older monks, of the text's power, of the spirits encountered within its verses, and of the dangers that awaited those unprepared for its dark truths. Despite the warnings, Tenzin felt a deep pull to understand death and the mysteries of the afterlife. One bitter winter night, when the mountain winds howled through the ancient stone halls, Tenzin received news of his closest friend's passing. Filled with grief, he resolved to guide his friend's spirit through the Bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, where the soul encounters visions, deities, and illusions. He was determined to ensure his friend's safe passage through the darkness. In the dim light of the candle-lit chamber, Tenzin opened the Bardo Thodol and began to recite its verses, his voice low and trembling. As he chanted, he read aloud, "Do not be afraid of the blinding light before you. It is the light of your own mind, a doorway to liberation. Hold firm and do not give in to fear." As he spoke, the room grew colder, the candlelight flickering as if the shadows themselves were stirring. Tenzin felt a presence as if unseen eyes were watching from the darkness. He continued, determined to lead his friend's soul through the Bardo, even as an unnatural stillness settled over the monastery. But the shadows crept closer, and Tenzin felt a gnawing doubt. He knew that reading the verses aloud in the presence of the deceased could summon visions from the Bardo realm, spirits caught between worlds. A dark thought whispered at the back of his mind. What if his friend had not been ready to move on? What if he had angered a spirit? Pushing the fear aside, Tenzin read further into the text, his voice shaking. If your mind falters, demons will appear, shaped by your own fears. They are but illusions. Do not let them control you. Blow breng sengistonger gyugs, bril bilugs, gyrsig yid cruel mitogs. As he chanted, Tenzin noticed a change in the air. A shadow darker than any night began to pool in the corner of the room, spreading slowly across the floor like ink spilled from the void. The figure coalesced, taking the form of a twisted face, familiar yet grotesque. It was his friend, but his features were distorted, twisted in agony. The apparition's hollow eyes met Tenzin's, and he was paralyzed with fear. He remembered the warnings from the Bardo Thodol. If the soul does not realize the illusions, it will be lost in the shadows. The dark figure advanced, whispering in a voice that was both a scream and a whisper, filling Tenzin's mind with doubt and dread. Desperate, Tenzin chanted a verse from the deepest part of the text, one meant only for those on the brink of losing their soul to the Bardo. Recognize the darkness before you as the void of your own fear. Let go, and move toward the light within. As he spoke, the figure paused, but its shadow remained, thick and pressing upon Tenzin like a heavy shroud. With one last desperate breath, Tenzin whispered another forbidden passage meant to call upon the protective deities of the Bardo, O deities of wrath and compassion, guide this soul through the darkness, bring forth the light and lead him from the shadows. Mingun per bong bi dang niem durum per bzung and gzung du spones gogbai. A pale blue light began to emerge, faint but unwavering, illuminating the shadowy figure. The apparition's twisted features began to soften, and Tenzin could feel his friend's spirit easing, his tortured soul finding peace. But as the light grew, Tenzin felt himself being pulled into the Bardo. He could see other spirits now, shadowy figures trapped between life and death, their eyes pleading. Some were lost souls, unable to move on, while others were darker, hollow beings that had been consumed by fear and darkness. The final verse echoed in his mind, a warning he had read but dismissed in his determination to help his friend. Those who seek to guide others through the Bardo may themselves be bound to it. The shadows will come for any soul that falters in the face of death. Jandal gudig dung kor bigging stig skjub bergrub pite bergjugs. Tenzin's voice grew faint and his vision darkened as he felt the Bardo itself pulling him into its depths. In his final moments he saw his friend's spirit drifting peacefully toward a glowing light freed from the darkness. But Tenzin himself remained, his soul now bound to the shadows of the Bardo, a prisoner to the forbidden verses he had dared to recite. To this day, the monks say that on cold winter nights, a shadowy figure can be seen roaming the monastery halls, whispering the ancient verses of the Bardo Thodol. It is Tenzin, they say, eternally trapped between life and death, bound to the fate he risked to save another.